One of the most exciting and mysterious sounding recordings of all time, I think, is the Rolling Stones' Street Fighting Man. I mean, the sound of it just jumps out of the speakers at you. Came out in 1968. It was a single. It was also on the Beggar's Banquet album. It's definitely up there in some of the greatest songs of all time, but a lot of people don't really know the story of the recording session and how that went, which was extremely unusual for the time, the way they recorded it, the way they arranged it. And it's kind of legendary among hardcore Stones geeks, such as myself. When Charlie Watts passed away last summer, I was very devastated, and I wanted to do something that would, that I think he would have enjoyed. This was one of his favorite sessions, as well as Keith Richards, and you'll see why as we get into this. So what I set out to do was not necessarily play the whole thing note for note, because the Stones themselves never play things exactly the same way twice. But what they would do is they would spend days in the studio obsessively chasing the right sound and the right groove for a song. And I've been known to be the same way at times. So that's what I wanted to capture. And luckily, I have some very talented friends that I was able to recruit who were willing to share this mad journey with me. Probably the most unusual thing is that there are no electric instruments on the record except for the bass, which Keith overdubbed later. Other than that, it's all acoustic stuff. Brian Jones played tamboura and sitar, and there's a shehnai, which you'll hear more about that. It's all just crazy, wacky instruments and wacky recording techniques, but it all started with the little cassette recorder. Charlie he was a jazz drummer at heart, as a lot of people know, and he really enjoyed the concept of kind of stepping into the shoes of someone who came before, and that's kind of what I wanted to do here, as Charlie did for some jazz drummer, probably in the 20s or 30s. What he did was he found this drum kit that was a little practice kit that folded up into a suitcase, and it was used when jazz musicians would travel by train, and they would use that to practice, or I guess to do busking. And Charlie found one of these in an antique store, apparently, and just fell in love with the thing. And at the same time, he and Keith were getting into making demo recordings on a little cassette player. Keith got a little cassette player, which is a Philips 3302. It was one of the earliest portable cassette players. And he famously wrote Satisfaction on it. Apparently, he in '65, when he first got it, he fell asleep, woke up in the middle of the night, hit record, hit the riff to Satisfaction, and then went back to sleep. And when he woke up, that was on the tape, and he didn't remember doing it. So he used to travel around in hotel rooms, or they'd gather at Mick's house and do demos of new songs. And Street Fighting Man, Jumpin' Jack Flash was also recorded the same way at Keith's house, I believe, and Parachute Woman. Some of the songs, they were really getting into doing these demos in '68. When they got into the studio, they tried to do it. They recorded it conventionally with Keith playing electric guitar, and Keith wasn't digging it. He said, I don't like the way this feels or sounds. I liked it better on the demo. And luckily everybody said, well, let's just do it like you did the demo. I first read about this when I was a teenager, and I was a guitar player, Stones fanatic. I was getting into audio engineering and especially drum sounds, and So when I heard about this, I read an interview with Keith and later one with Charlie where they talked about this session, and I was like, what? A drum kit that folds into a suitcase. Okay. And, recording an acoustic guitar into a cassette recorder, and that's the track. All right, then. And so I had a little portable cassette recorder. I grew up in the 70s, and I had a Radio Shack one or a Panasonic or something like that. And I tried it, and didn't work because you can't overdrive it enough. They would put a limiter in there, which, that's not any fun. that keeps you from distorting it too much, and the distortion was the whole point. I realized that I was not going to be able to get this sound with a, quote, modern cassette recorder, 1970s and later. And so I kind of gave up on it for a while. And of course I had no idea what the little suitcase thing looked like. I couldn't even imagine that. So fast forward many years and I suddenly became very determined, especially when the pandemic was raging. I said, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna figure out how this happened. And a few years ago, the Stones had their exhibitionism tour where they have a museum kind of exhibit. And they actually have an exhibit that shows the cassette recorder and the Suitcase Drum Kit. So I finally found out what the thing looked like. I was like, yes, I can do this. So I set out to recreate the suitcase kit. So I tracked down this military suitcase. A good friend of mine, Sarah Marks, helped me to put some red felt lining in there so it looks like the original one. There's all this weird stuff in these little kits. A triangle. It's got a little bell. And it's got this funky symbol, which I actually, when I got this, it was a brand new shiny symbol. Wasn't having any of that. So I got on YouTube and I figured out how to make it look old with some vinegar and hydrogen peroxide, so it looks like an aged symbol. These are frame drums, so I actually got some wooden hoops and some goatskin drum heads and made these little drums. Yeah, so here's the little snare drum, and this was Charlie's favorite thing about it. There's this little 2-wire snare that's made out of gut, and it almost sounds like a snare drum, but it's just 2 little wires, and Charlie just apparently absolutely loved that thing. It really looks like the original suitcase kit. And then I had to find the actual cassette recorder, because obviously that was the only one that you could actually use that sounds like that. And I would occasionally look on eBay, and sometimes people would sell them, not too often, but they were not usually in working shape. But one night I was chatting with my friend Paul Frindle, who's a audio heavyweight kind of guy. He's designed a lot of the equipment, recording equipment that we hear on modern records. And he's English. He still lives in England, and he grew up in the 60s. And so I thought, well, he probably knows something about this. And one night I said, Paul, do you know about the Philips 3302 portable cassette recorder? And he said, oh yeah, I had one when I was a kid, and so did my friends. I used to fix them up for all my friends. And I said, of course you did. And he got on a website in the UK and immediately found one that looked like it was in good shape. It was in Ireland somewhere. And he was actually kind enough to have them ship it to him. And he spent hours and hours fixing that thing up, restoring it, and making it sound like pretty much new. And I'm eternally grateful. Thank you, Paul. So I finally had the missing ingredient.
Hello, Lee. I'm your new cassette machine. Thanks so much for rescuing me. Looks like I'm good to go, and I can't wait to meet you soon. Bye.
So here's the actual recorder, and then here's the magic. it's got this little microphone with it. It's a little crystal microphone. You can actually just, you know, jam that into the guitar, and it's got controls where you can control how hot you record. And Keith apparently would just crank that, and it sounds like an electric guitar when you do that. So the way they did this apparently was that Keith said he recorded a whole bunch of different guitar tracks, like, you know, 8 or 9 of them or something, and they were all different tunings and different capo positions and all that. And he has no idea which ones ended up being on the final thing. So I just decided to, you know, approximate doing all different ones. So I'm doing this one in open E. That was how we did the cassette track, because you can get it really nice. I've got the mic from the cassette recorder right here clamped to the drum kit, and so that way you can, you know, jam up really close to it and just play it really hard. And, you know, he's got the and then I just move the capo down a little bit, and then you can get the low part. So I'm just going to do a whole bunch of overdubs like that, and I think there was one in open G and one in standard tuning, and just kind of go crazy. But that's what he did with all that. And then, you know, he's got the guitar right up next to the little mic, and then, you know, it's sitting right there on the drums. So Charlie played the little drum kit, and it's just massive. It just, you know, overdrives it into that microphone, and got the volume cranked up on this thing, and it's just too cool. They would sit on cushions on the floor, and Keith and Charlie would sit next to each other and play. And they loved doing this. So there was a little bit of a plot twist, and there's one part in the recording that we couldn't quite figure out where it was coming from. It sounds like a shaker, but it really doesn't. And meanwhile, I had heard 2 different kind of conflicting stories about how the Suitcase session happened. One of them was Charlie played it with sticks, which he obviously did, because we did the thing with sticks, and it sounds like the record. But then apparently he broke the head on this drum, and in the museum exhibit they have it with the broken head. So that much we know. And then apparently he switched to brushes after that, and we think that even though it wasn't done on the cassette, that he actually did an overdub or 2 with playing the brushes on the broken snare head. So we obviously don't want to break this, but we're going to put some tape on it so that it damps the sound a little bit and makes it sound like it's been broken. Oh my God, that's totally it.
All right.
Holy shit. So the last piece of the puzzle here with this thing is that Dave Mason actually came along and played a shehnai, which is like a type of Indian oboe that they play at weddings and things like that. I have no idea why Dave Mason had one or whether he learned how to play it or what, but
he got it from Mr. Fantasy.
Yeah, there we go. But this is my good friend Tom Gibson. That's Dr. Tom Gibson to
Hello.
you. And he is a fantastic trombone player, and you know, he's played in the Atlanta Symphony.
You're not going to believe it.
Yeah. And I actually got him a shehnai and said, "Can you learn to play this thing?"
And, we've yet to answer that.
We're about to answer that. So the Stones recorded this track at Olympic Studios in London, and if you had been in the room at the time when they were doing this session the way Peter and I are doing it here, this is more or less what it would have sounded like. And then it was all getting baked into the cassette where the magic happens. And then they took the cassette and they plugged it into a PA speaker while it was going down to a track of the multi-track recorder, probably an 8-track recorder. And then they blasted it out into the room and everybody just started piling all the other instruments on top of it. They took this and, according to lore, they plugged it into the PA. I'm just going to plug it into the console here. And then they blasted it back through the PA speakers, and it sounds like this.